Frank Sloan, we know, is the J. Alexander McMahon Professor of Health Policy and Management and Professor of Economics at Duke. When I took this job a couple years ago, I didn't know Frank personally. I, of course, knew of him, and I'll admit I was actually quite intimidated by the prospect of working closely with him in ASHEcon. In fact, a contemporary of Frank's called him born serious. And this is not an unserious person who said this. It's Mark Pauly, for crying out loud. I mean, so you know, I didn't know what I was in for, but what I soon discovered is a serious scholar, first and foremost, but also a man with a wonderful sense of humor and a person who has an incredible passion for our field and has really worked tirelessly in these 2 years as president of ASHEcon. And it's been a true delight and a privilege for me to work with him over these 2 years. I'm going to miss our regular phone calls, but know that the organization is considerably stronger now because of all that Frank has done. So I am pleased to offer him this small token here of ASHEcon's appreciation. Crystal gavel that you can use to knock sense into graduate students.
I am going to offer sort of a more practical presidential address, in that we're going to talk about the journal that we have started during the last 2 years. But before I do that, I want to make a few introductory comments. The president's role is, he says, works tirelessly, but the president's role is to work very closely with the executive director, to have phone calls on a regular basis, to deal with a few crises as they occur. But the role is actually, of president, is actually fairly ill-defined, and there's really no history book that speaks to what presidents have done in the past, and so you sort of have to invent what you're going to do as you go along. The presidency is rotating. We don't have a dictatorship of the proletariat that lasts for 40 years. Rather, the presidency rotates every 2 years. And when I became president, I was under the perception that we had been very successful in having biennial conferences and lots of interest and growing attendance. Yet there was sort of a hiatus in between conferences, and also what we had inherited was pretty much the model of the AJHE. And AJHE is a very successful organization in its own right, but we maybe want to do something a little different. And also, are we really doing enough for the professional development of our members? Many of our members are recent graduates. They are in different kinds of positions. And, you know, is there really enough of an outlet for their work as economists? We are the association, Health Economics Association. So while there are many health journals, there are fewer economics journals and that are in healthcare, and therefore fewer options for scholars in our field to submit papers to. So they're going to be members who are primarily interested in the biennial conferences. They're going to be members who are maybe primarily interested in the journal. They're going to be members that are interested in both, and they're going to be members who are interested in neither, or maybe they won't be members for that reason. But so what we wanted to do is at least to give an option to recognize heterogeneity of preferences. And so a lot of the 2 years have been spent putting this project together. Now, before I start referring to slides, and what we have up here is the cover of our new journal, I do want to recognize the National Institute on Aging, which is a sponsor, has been a sponsor for years of these meetings, and for some reason was left out of the program. The NIA has been by the side of health economics and social sciences for decades now. Many of the other institutes don't have, or most of the other institutes don't have, even a fraction of the interest in health economics or in economics as does the NIA. So I just want to indicate on behalf of the association our depth of gratitude for their support and apologize for the omission in the program. Okay, I'm going to start now with the slides. And what we're going to do, well, let me just say before I want to do that, is that there's very little normative in these comments, but I just want to say that we should probably look at ASHEcon as a public good, and we should look at this journal ultimately as a public good as well. We thrive, we collectively thrive when we have this asset, and as the asset prospers, to some extent we profit. Obviously, there's a private good aspect to a journal in that if one person's getting published, probably means somebody else is not published. But on the other hand, that's only worth anything if, in fact, the journal is good and that we enjoy this public good aspect. So now the slide. So this is the cover. We plan to publish in winter, that probably is February of 2015, will be our first issue. There will be 4 issues a year. Initially, we're going to have hard copy as well as electronic. Later, maybe we will drop the hard copy. We will see how that goes. But we want it to be more than just an electronic journal. It's sort of, there's something to just seeing the articles in print. Maybe that's an old-fashioned view, and if it is, we will change it. I want to recognize, it's a little hard, at least from here, it's very dark. But sitting in the front row is Lindsay Eldred, who is managing editor of the journal. Nick Lindsay, who is the journal head of MIT Press, was here earlier, but I understand he had to leave. So this is the email addresses and telephone numbers of these individuals. So Lindsay is working on this. Both of us are working sort of not full-time, but we're working extremely actively to move this process of review of articles along and trying to promote the journal as well. Now, why have a new journal? This is a question that we asked, certainly during some part of our 2 years. One is the field of health economics is growing. Obviously, one impetus for the growth, at least in terms of the media exposure, has been the ACA. But that's okay. So that means that there's probably more people entering the field, and there are more people who want to publish in the field. Okay. A second motive was to enhance the professional development of ASHEcon members. one thing that I'm discovering as I look at these reviews of the articles and then try to interpret them for the authors, what the reviews are saying, or say what's important and what's not, is the fantastic amount of mentoring that goes on. This is mentoring not necessarily just of the editor, by the editor, but of the members who, and the non-members who review these articles and offer their suggestions. A third motive was to broaden the scope of ASHEcon beyond holding biannual conferences. So it's sort of nice to have these conferences. Tony has joked on more than one occasion that I'm not for having any fun, but having fun is great. But what we're really here, what we're paying these fees for to come here and paying for the airline tickets is to develop professionally, to get comments and criticisms of our work. We may, at some point, not immediately, want to hold some special topics conferences in off years. We wanted to differentiate ASHEcon from AJHE and the other regional health economics organizations, which are not doing journals, at least yet. Further the health economics knowledge base, foster competition among health economics journals, and there I might comment that many of the people on this side of the Atlantic, or this side of the Pacific, as the case may be, feel that the European journals are publishing different kinds of materials than they're publishing, and they sort of then have the Journal of Health Economics, but they, that is the journal that exists, and it's a great journal, but we thought it'd be great to have some alternatives for our members. As a U.S. journal, we encourage submissions from other countries, but we're particularly interested in U.S. topics, and certainly a lot of what's happening with the healthcare delivery system, we hope, will be reflected in our journal. Now, this is an ambition that we have, is to be recognized as the best health economics journal, I suppose globally. This will take a lot of effort. It will take time, but we think we're off to an excellent start, as I will illustrate in some coming slides. A brief history of the journal. The board voted to pursue the idea of a new journal. A subcommittee of the board was appointed to talk about the particulars of the journal. And one of the big issues that we dealt with was not only not whether to have a journal or not, but whether to take over an existing journal or start a new journal. Now, what we were surprised by was the number of existing journals that proposed that we consider them. We sort of thought that that wouldn't happen, but it did happen. Maybe that's telling us something about the journal world, maybe that we don't want to hear. But there were a number of journals that offered their services or offered their journals to us. The problem is that one of the problems was with the title, because they wanted to retain some of their old title, and we are the ASHEcon Journal, and we are the American Journal of Health Economics, so to have international in our title, or there was one human biology journal, to say, American Health Economics and Human Biology, might not go over well, even though I had many conversations on that topic, because the editor of that journal works down the hall. Then there was a choice of publisher. There are many of these electronic presses out there. We decided that we didn't want that, and we decided that we would go with the university press. And within the university press, I had a lot of long working relationship with MIT, a very positive experience, and MIT in the economics world is quite a name. So even though the MIT press is independent of the MIT economics department, there's probably some associations in the, in the broad world out there of those two. The decision was made for us to own our journal. And what that means is that if we were unhappy with MIT, that we could move the journal to another publisher. If MIT had owned the journal, then they would retain the title AJHE, and we could call ourselves the Journal of Soviet American Economics or something like that, but we could not use the title AJHE anymore, and it seemed like it would be sort of a nice thing to be able to do that. That was one of the reasons. We're sharing more in the risk as a result, we're sharing more in the revenue, but we thought that it was worth it. Then there was the appointment of the editor and the editorial board. I sort of volunteered to be the founding editor, and by that it means that I want to get this thing going, but I will be more than happy to turn this over to a successor. So this is sort of a temporary thing. And but we then also appointed an editorial board of people that are well known in the field of health economics and allied fields. And we're still working on what the role of that editorial board will be. It met earlier this morning. We do have some pointers on what the editorial board will do, chart the general direction of the journal, ultimately appoint my successor, maybe jointly with ASHEcon, which owns the journal, appoint new editorial board members. Everybody is appointed for a 3-year term presently, advise the editor on specific papers, which would include choice of reviewers, whether the paper should get a revise and resubmit, etc. Temporarily, we are centralizing the review process. And the reason is that when you start farming out, you say, here's a paper, we just got it, you send it to an associate editor, you've created one more link in the chain between the review, the submission of the paper and the final decision. Ultimately, that will be a good idea, but it just seemed like to get us jump-started that we would be a little bit more centralized initially. Our editorial board, as you see, does consist of very distinguished health economists with a broad range of interests in economics and in healthcare in specific terms. We are viewing health economics very broadly. I mean, obviously, we're not going to be writing on the auto industry or something like that, but we very broadly, we're construing, health and health behavior, form of human capital. We're looking at the healthcare delivery system. We're interested in other healthcare delivery systems, particularly as they offer lessons for the U.S., but we're very welcoming of international submissions from other countries. Now, why submit to AJHE? Now, this sounds a bit like a platitude, this slide. Health economics is an applied micro field, okay? Now, some people in standard economics departments say, well, that's what it is. That is health economics. You got data from someplace and you just are running a regression, or you've got some sort of theory and it's really about asymmetric information, or it's about something, but it's really basically what you need is to know some theory and some metrics, and then you can do health economics. That's really what it comprises. But probably there's a little bit more here. Health economics recognizes the special attributes of health and healthcare, the special institutional arrangements that have risen in response to these attributes, tries on occasion or more than an occasion to address health policy issues as they apply to financing, supply, and organization of healthcare. Now, what this really means is that there are going to be some articles that are neat, but they're not neat in terms of demonstrating a new methodology, or maybe a field experiment and showing how you do that. I mean, obviously we welcome those articles, but this isn't just what it's about. It's about something more broadly. It certainly retains the notion of microeconomics in the health field, but at the same time recognizes health and recognizes the special institutional arrangements. So when we look at articles to be submitted, if the article is just epidemiologic, there are lots of good journals out there. It doesn't really fit what we're trying to do here. We want some economic framework. We want best practice econometrics, but we also want some recognition of that part of the field that makes us a little different. Why submit to AJHE? Okay. Now, I remember talking with Joe Newhouse when he founded JHE, and he made some of the same points. This is back in the early 80s. There's a role for a specialty journal like a JHE or AJHE. Reach a readership interested in the topic of healthcare, allow for greater detail on the health content. A sort of a side benefit is to get a greater number of citations, often from readers outside of the economics field, in and out. The negatives are if you were in the economics department and you go to the chair or you talk to your senior colleagues and say, well, I've gotten an article in the AJHE, they say, well, I would prefer that you publish in the AEJ or AER or JPE. Well, a lot of people would prefer to do that, but there just is a different audience and it's a different time. So we're not saying you shouldn't publish in the AEJ or the AER or the JPE, but we're saying that maybe ideally you would, if you could do both, you would have one piece there, a more detailed piece that is a little bit more specialized to healthcare, set to the AJHE. Submitting to the AJHE. Submission fee is waived through July 31, 2014. We're probably going to end up waiving it a little more than that. Subsequently, the submission fee will be waived for ASHEcon members, and you will be able to submit an unlimited number of papers per year as a member. There will be a submission fee to non-members, but it will be set at a level to encourage people joining the ASHEcon. And the other parts of this slide show how you would submit to the journal. You can either do that through the ASHEcon website or through the MIT Press website. We're using Scholastica currently. We're going to change to another vendor, but we're going to try to make that as smooth as possible for you as users. The first issue of the journal is scheduled for the first quarter of 2015. There will be 4 issues a year. We're going to try to get a backlog, though, initially, so that it gets scary, to put an issue together and then say, whoops, what do I have, for the next issue? So we face the challenge right now of backlog, which means that of creating the backlog, which means that the good part of that is that we're encouraging submissions. We're not going to say we have 1,000 submissions a year and we couldn't look at your paper. We're going to look at every paper we get or have already done that very seriously. As I indicated before, this journal will be both print and electronic. There will be 144 pages per issue, approximately. This is in our contract with MIT Press. and there will be 6 to 8 papers per issue, maybe initially more on the 6th side, and as we get mature a bit, go moving toward the 8th side. We, at least initially, are not having book reviews. We prefer original research to review papers. Doesn't mean that a review paper wouldn't be looked at, but we're really looking for original theoretical and empirical research. Not only do we greatly prefer papers with an economic model. That economic model could be a verbal framework, you know, rather than just repeating somebody else's model, unless you've got a model that you can, you know, that's your own. But we want some economic framework. We want up-to-date metrics. The health policy element is useful, but it is not mandatory. Promote U.S. articles, but welcome papers on non-U.S. topics. And we have a broad concept of what constitutes health economics. So you might have a labor paper on compensating wage differentials, or you know, and how that relates to premiums, as discussed last night. It might be paper that was published. There were papers on this published in the Journal of Labor Economics. We welcome them in the American Journal of Health Economics. Okay, I see that I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to go through these metrics rather quickly. These are metrics on the journal, and maybe what I will do, I won't emphasize that. This shows, this slide here shows the journal submission arrivals by week. We just started accepting articles on February 1, 2014, and we have 47 submissions, which we're told is quite good. We're told by the MIT Press is quite good in comparison to other journals. We will want, that will annualize to 100, a little over 100, maybe a year, and we want to be, pretty soon, we want to be at 200 a year in terms of submissions. This slide shows the ASHE, this is a little dated, this slide, not too dated. Shows that most of the people that that submit, the first author is an ASHEcon member, but there are a number who are not. The next slide is so similar, but it's one author. Okay, now the difference is, however, in the review process. In the review process, we have invited about 200 reviewers in the in this very short period. Most of them are not members of ASHEcon. And we regard this as positive in that maybe some will become members, but also we're seeing that the content of the articles is going to have to pass muster with people who are not necessarily card-carrying health economists. We've had a good experience with getting reviewers. These are statistics on the members as reviewers, and you see that more people have accepted and completed, which is the orange. A bunch have declined, which is the yellow. But however, many of the decliners will give us names of people that we might invite to review. And what we do in those cases is we Google them, we find out what they've written, and we sort of welcome this, this new crop. These are often people that aren't the old usual suspects. We want to be open to everybody and not just to the people who have worked in this territory for all these years. And then here we have the non-members as reviewers. More non-member reviewers decline. Now, the next slide deals with desk rejects and days to reject. Okay. Now, one of the problems that we face in economics, even worse than in the health journals, is the length of time to review. I mean, I've had papers that have been a year before I hear, and I'm not up for tenure. If I were up for tenure, I would be very, very nervous. And we had this when I was up for tenure. It's been a chronic disease in economics. It takes a long time to get papers reviewed. We can't afford that. We get to send the papers out to review very quickly. When we get the submissions, the reviewers are given reminders. If the review doesn't come in, either we deal with the reviews we have or we send out to another reviewer. So we're actually running less than 2 months to a negative decision. The positive decision is revise and resubmit so far, and it's about the same length. Balance. We're getting a lot of articles on health and health behavior. Okay. We would like more articles on the healthcare system. We would like theory papers, but we haven't gotten many of these. Under the healthcare system, we want to see papers on supply, organization, and financing of services, evaluation of alternative delivery and financing methods. We are less interested, I wouldn't say not interested, but we are much less interested than the European journals in what is called economic evaluation. So it doesn't mean don't send those articles, but it could be that we're going to suggest that you send to the other journals. And promoting the journal. There's one thing that isn't on here. Well, maybe it's on the next slide. Okay, we've had different ways of promoting the journal. Let me get to the next slide. Okay. We've gotten lots of positive feedback from members and persons who've submitted papers. The feedback has dealt with the concept of the AJHE as well as the execution. As an ASHEcon member, this is your journal. So we don't, no individual member, including me, we're not guaranteed publication, but this is your journal. So this means that submitting you're in the role of submitter, the role of reviewer, the role of reader. This is your journal. And we've made the choice, like the labor economics people, to have a journal. A lot of societies don't. So now the question is, how do we implement it effectively? You can help by submitting high-quality research papers to the AJE, agreeing to be a reviewer, submitting detailed reviews in a timely fashion, and giving us feedback. Finally, the way the finances of the journal business works, they're not going to make money from you so much, they're going to make money from your libraries. And so if you click, you click on an article, you say, well, I can click, I don't need to buy the journal anymore. But when you click, the only reason that you get a response is that the journal subscribes. So we're going to be sending around material with the help of MIT Press to encourage libraries to subscribe and maybe suggest that you guys help us with this. So thank you very much.